I'm Jayle, and this is part 2 of my tutorial on how I take notes and reorganize them into a format to help me study for my exam. I feel like in my first video I was really nervous, and so I felt very stiff talking. And so in this part 2, I just want to relax a little bit and be a little bit more of myself because it's less stressful. And I still feel that it's very awkward to talk in front of a camera. For this video, if you have not watched part 1 on how I take my notes in class, please go ahead and watch that first before you watch this video. But if you have watched the first part in this video, what I'll show you guys is how I take those notes and turn it into a chart format called illness script. Same thing as earlier, just want to note I'm using a MacBook Pro. If you're using any other device other than an Apple product, the steps may be different. This is an illness script, and this is what my illness script usually include. It includes the overview, pathophysiology, etiology, also known as cause, epidemiology, risk factors, clinical presentation, also known as clinical manifestation, physical exam findings, diagnosis or evaluation, and treatment. You can change your illness script to your liking, but this is what I usually have and what I prefer. So starting with the overview, I usually do a couple sentences to summarize what the disorder is about. So if, for example, my disorder is heart failure, I'll quickly summarize it in a couple sentences. Pathophysiology, this is pretty self-explanatory. It's just going to discuss the physiology of the disorder, the etiology or the cause, and this could be factors that causes a disease. So for example, genetics can be a component. Next, we have the epidemiology. For this portion, I included some example, and this is what I usually put. For example, it affects blank population in the US. Is the disorder, does it affect more males or does it affect more females? And then I include either the age here or the age range, so either one is fine. Moving on, we have risk factors, and this is other factors that can contribute to the disease. So if a patient has comorbidities like hypertension or high blood pressure, diabetes, environmental exposures, etc. Clinical presentation or clinical manifestation, either word is fine. And usually under this section, I put my symptoms and signs, but I usually put more symptoms and signs under the physical exam findings. So physical exam findings, I would include my signs. For example, I would include tachycardia, which is increased heart rate, something you can actually see on the patient if you were to measure the heart rate. Next, we have diagnosis and evaluation, and this is where I would include labs. So for example, blood tests, imaging would be ultrasound or MRI, and etc. And treatment, I usually break it down into non-form treatment, which includes exercise, diet, weight loss, etc., or form treatments, and this would be your medication. When you're doing your illness script, you can leave it in this bullet point format. However, I like to transfer it into a chart format, so like these. So I basically just took the headings and put it onto the left column of each chart. I usually don't like how this looks because I feel as if it's really cluttered, so I like to condense it into this version. So the only difference is really I clump patho, etiology, epi, and risk factor under the overview section. My charts usually looks like this, and I transfer everything over to the side, and on the left column I put my images here. This is an example image of some pills, and under the picture I put a caption to explain the picture. So for this example, I will put like a name of a medication, and the picture correlates with each of the headings. So for clinical presentation, I could put a picture of like a rash, for example. You see how this is in bullet point format, but you can actually section it off like this versus this. Up to you if you want to section it off like this or just do bullet point. So my usual charts, they look like this or they look like this. Like another way I do my charts as well, what you can do is actually clump it like this. So you see how here I put the system, for example pulmonary, and underneath the system I put each disorder. So asthma and tuberculosis would fall under pulmonary, and these tables are merged or connected to one another, versus up here the tables are separated. Okay, so let me delete this real quick to show you guys what my chart will look like. So these are some examples of the charts I make. It's up to you how you want to personalize it. So for each of my notes or my document, I start off by naming the class, and then I do the system that I'm learning. So for example, we're doing cardiology, and underneath that is going to be the disease in that system. So it's going to be heart failure as an example. And I put my name on the side as a header, but it's up to you. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys how I make my charts or my tables. What you want to do first is click insert, and you're going to select tables. And now you can select the numbers of rows and columns, but I usually just do 2 times 8. And once you select your table, if you look up here, you can actually change the colors and the style of the chart. If you want to be extra, you can select these colors. I usually just go for the second one, which is the light gray. So if you compare this chart to this chart, this one is obviously smaller or narrower. So what you want to do is extend. Drag these lines out and extend it. So right now this document is orientated in the landscape mode. So if you want to change it, you can click layout, orientation. You can choose portrait or landscape. If you click portrait, you see how the chart looks like this. If I insert another table, the chart basically will look smaller. I prefer landscape because it gives you more room to write. So we have landscape, gives you more room to put your information into the chart, versus portrait mode. You get smaller room, so less amount of room to put your information in. Let me delete this chart. Now we have our chart, and what I do is merge this chart, and I will put the name of the disorder. So for example, heart failure would be here. And I like to give it some spacing. So the next step is optional, but you can fill in this row with a color. And I already set my colors to this, but you can change the color theme. So to change the color theme, you click on design, you go over to colors, and you have a bunch of color options. My favorite is paper, but violet, and median is also very pretty. I like to fill it with light pink, bold, and make it size 14. So next, you're just going to enter in the illness script headings. Overview, type of presentation, diagnosis or evaluation, and treatment. For the extra rows right here, if you want to remove it, you can right click if you're using a mouse and just delete the cells and delete the rows. Okay. And as mentioned earlier, I like to clump the patho, etiology or the cause, the epidemiology, and the risk factors under overview. In order to do the section thing, the section format I told you, click layout, and you want to hit split cells. Split cells, and you can change the amount or the number of columns, but I usually just stick with the standard 2. So when you hit this, the cell gets split into 2. Drag it over, and then if you go over to the right, you can hit enter and it creates a new column for you. Or if you're using a mouse, you can go to the side, right click, insert rows below. For diagnosis, I usually put physical exam findings under diagnosis, but some of my classmates, they do put physical exam findings under the clinical presentation section. So you can do labs and imaging, ultrasound, MRI, etc. Okay, so that's how you have your sections. So once I have my section, you see on the left column, there are these lines, and I don't like how that looks. So what you can do is right click, hit merge cells, And when you merge it, it looks like this, and it just looks neater. If you don't want to do this column section, you can just leave it like this, as mentioned earlier. The next thing I want to go over is the bullet format in Microsoft Words. If I was to create a bullet, a dash, hi, I press enter tab, it will give you a new bullet. And I hit enter and tab, it will give me another bullet. If you try to do this in this chart, it doesn't allow you to do that for some odd reason. If you do know how to do this, please let me know because I have not figured it out yet. If you were to hit enter and press tab, instead of giving you this new bullet point, it just highlights the clinical presentation. So in order to fix it, you hit enter, you have to hit backspace, and you had to manually go up here and select the bullet, right? Hi. You hit enter and tab is going to highlight the clinical presentation again. So the same thing, you have to hit backspace, go up here and manually select your bullet point. And I find this extremely annoying, but I am so accustomed to doing this now that it doesn't really bother me anymore. Moving on, you see how there is this space right here, and with this space it breaks up your table. So what you can do is double click this area, and if you double click it, it's going to merge the table like this, and now the chart is on one continuous page. And to undo it, you just have to go back here and double click it again. Once you created your chart, what you want to do now is paste over the information from your lecture onto this chart. So if your original lecture was already in a PowerPoint format, then that's great. You just need to copy and paste it over. But if your lecture was given to you in a PDF format, what you want to do is convert that PDF into a PowerPoint in order to copy and paste. And for that step, I have mentioned in my first video. If you haven't seen it yet, please go watch it. So if you're using a Mac, a quick way to copy and paste your note is just having the document and your PowerPoint lecture open, and you can just slide it back and forth like this. This is the example PowerPoint that I've created. In addition to my fun facts, I went ahead and add in the headings and some examples. Just want to note that your lecture, not all lecture is going to give you these exact headings, so you have to read the information and decide where you're going to input the information into your chart. For the purpose of this demonstration, I made it simple for us. Okay, so for etiology, for example, what you're going to do is take this information, copy, and paste it onto your chart. And for this, remember, we have to do our bullet point trick method technique thing. So paste it, boom, slide back, epidemiology, copy. And when you paste it, sometimes it's going to change your format. To avoid that, hit enter a bunch of times and then paste it over. And when you paste it over, it's not going to change the bullet point. And now you can just select this bullet point and change it to the bullet point that you want. Okay. And I usually just bold the section and put a spacing between each heading. And you're going to do the same for the rest of the PowerPoint. So for the pictures, as mentioned earlier, I usually just copy it and transfer it onto my note, and I put it on the left column. And sometimes when you transfer, this happens. So when you transfer your photos, it doesn't go into the chart. Instead, it just floats around like this. So what you want to do if this happens is actually screenshot this image. So you're going to do screenshot, take the picture, and your picture is going to appear right here. Take it and drag it into the section that you want. And then once I put it in, you're going to see that it shifts my columns because the picture is extremely large. What you want to do is just shrink it back to size. And I like to have it in the middle, and underneath is optional, but this is where I will put my caption. and I like to change it to size 10, this, and in the center. So this is how I reorganize my notes, everyone. I make my chart and I take the information from my lecture and paste it onto this table. So there you have it, guys. This is how I reorganize my lecture notes into a table to help me study. So this concludes the two-part series of this tutorial on how I take my notes and how I study for my exam. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I really hope you find this tutorial helpful. Now that I'm done recording, I need to stop procrastinating and get back to studying. So yeah. Okay, until next time, bye-bye. One of this tutorial, I'm not going to give you guys the specifics of things. The specifics of things.